This episode of RadCast Outdoors is brought to you by PK Lures, Bow Spider, and High Mountain Seasonings.
Fish on! Hey, RadCast is on!
Hunting, fishing, and everything in between. This is RadCast Outdoors. Here are David Merrill and Patrick Edwards.
Well, hello and welcome to RadCast Outdoors, special episode 100. David, how's that sound?
That's interesting.
It's
for
crazy.
Sure.
And this is episode 1 of season 5. That's another mind-blowing thing to think about.
So if you're out there and you're listening to us and you're just discovering this right now, you need to go back at least 3, maybe even 4 seasons. First season was, granted, I'll give you, we were just getting our feet under us, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, definitely stop right now. Pause this. Go back to, back to the way back pre-COVID years.
Yep.
And start listening from there. And then you can come reflect on 100 episodes. You and I have got to sit here with, people from all over the country, people we've known, people we've never met before. It's a pretty big milestone. So for anybody out there listening, thank you. We're glad you're here with us, and come join us for episode number 100.
Yeah, and we thought it'd be kind of fun to go back and reflect a little bit about the journey to get here, some of our favorite episodes, and just talk about some of our favorite moments. And this podcast really started, I remember when you came to me and said, hey, would you be interested in doing a podcast? Because County 10 had approached us about, hey, would you guys do an outdoor podcast? And I remember thinking to myself, I don't know that I've ever thought about really doing this, but sure, that sounds like fun. I love talking about fishing. That'd be great.
Well, you and I had sat around and talked fishing and hunting at your previous job when I was getting ready to launch this company. And I just had the light bulb of, I think if we take my experience and my side of view of the coin and take yours, both of us have a varied hunting and fishing background, but you're hyper focused on the fishing, I'm hyper focused on the hunting. I said it'd be a pretty cool duo dynamic of, kind of yin and yang in the outdoor world.
Yeah,
right?
And little known to everybody, our very first actual logo kind of thing was a yin and yang. It was you with an elk and me with a walleye. I think something like that.
It was all right. I like our new logo better.
I do too, but I mean that takes me back just thinking about that. I mean, we had a logo that was, very different and didn't know what we were doing at all. As
Zero.
far as we just kind of had conversations, which I think is what's cool about podcasting, is it really is just it's a conversation and talking about topics that we care about. And we're still talking about the things that we care about, which I think is cool, but it was pretty cool getting started and having help getting started. So thank you to County 10 for that, because it was helpful to have a place to go, the equipment and everything to get started. Of course, since COVID and everything, we have all of our own equipment. We're all on our own, doing all of our own editing, all of our own everything. And so that's been a journey and a learning experience, I think, for both of us.
Definitely. I mean, harken back to that County 10 for sure. We had their studio, we had their equipment, we had their editor. So, we kind of just got to show up with a guest and knock one out of the park, right? And I think we were under their umbrella, and I'm really thankful we were for about 14 episodes. And then, we really moved this thing around there for a while, trying to find a studio space until finally I said, bag this. We lost a really good episode recorded on my kitchen table because of some electronic interference background. That was Dan Thompson. We've had him on several times, but that was probably the best Dan Thompson episode, and it's gone.
Yeah, it's just popping sounds from cell phone interference or something. But
Danny Kurtula was in your back spare bedroom.
Yep.
Danny's, he's not here with us anymore, and I know that's a soft spot, but I'm really glad that I got to go fishing and interview Danny, and now I can go back and, I didn't get to grow up with Danny, but I heard you talk about Danny and the influence he was in fishing in your life, right? And so getting to even the 2 trips we went on, right? We went, it was a Boysen both times, ice fishing below the dam and above the dam, but he wasn't ever very chauvinistic, right? He didn't walk up to me and go, hey, I'm Danny, I'm world record holder, I'm probably the biggest fishing deal you'll ever meet. just this humble guy's like, "Hey, I got my pole. I'm coming today." Right?
Yeah, let's go.
Let's go. And so, and you go from that episode in your on my kitchen table, and then Danny's in your spare room. We did 1 or 2 upstairs in the bow spider room because we were just scrambling to find a dedicated space. And now having the studio we're in now is pretty sweet to roll in, turn on the on-air light. We're recording, and it's kind of our space, right?
Yeah, I mean it's something that we all really wanted to do, right? You and I have talked about it for a long time. We wanted to have our own space. We wanted to have a place where we could just go do the recordings, have the ability to bring guests on virtually or in person. We can do that. And we've grown a lot over the time that we've been doing this. And, it's cool that you mentioned Danny, because that was episode 46 and that was a ways back. But, he was kind of a pioneer and somebody from Wyoming that had done a lot that no one had really heard his story. And this podcast was a way for people to find out about him and what all he had done. Pike slam, bass slam, world records, line class world records, all kinds of stuff. And, he's been gone, since September, but due to the cancer, but he's still living in other ways, and his influence will be felt for many years.
If you ever get a chance and you are traveling through Riverton, Wyoming, stop in Rocky Mountain Discount Sports. In the fishing department up on the wall is a very good tribute to Danny, and getting to see his accomplishments, his mounts, all his trophies. So,
yeah,
and that's to our sponsors. They sponsored an episode there way back in the beginning. We had High Mountain Seasoning with Brian and Hans on like episode 2 or 3, I think it was.
It was early on. I don't remember what episode number it was, 3. But it was like, yeah, we had those guys on, and they've a huge thank you to High Mountain and that crew, that entire crew. They've been extra supportive of this podcast, and they're just some of the best people on the planet.
And they have a great product.
Yeah.
I mean, it's cool that they're right here, and then we move on to PK. We had Pat O'Grady on like episode 4, right?
Yeah.
And then PK picked up and sponsored, and I'm not going to tote Bow Spider's horn because there's some, there's definitely some conflicting interests there, but still, we've got some great companies sponsoring this, and it's been, Patrick, we're at 100 of these.
Yeah, and it's hard for me to reconcile that in my mind, just thinking about over 100 hours of content, because we have some episodes that are, a little bit shorter than an hour. And then we have
a couple that are almost 2.
Pretty long. So depending on what you like to listen to, we've got just about everything.
Fishing.
Yeah. I think about some of the variety, right? Like, some of my favorite episodes we've done on the fishing side. I mean, Al Linder was great too. I mean, just having Al and his experience and just him talking about his faith, family, fishing, all of those things was super cool. And Larry Dahlberg, I mean, a guy that I've just really looked up to for so many years, because he's the real deal. I mean, that guy can catch anything on any body of water. I never thought we had a chance to even get him on the show. Like, I was like, this guy, I'm going to reach out and see. And he was so gracious and so kind, and was like, yeah, of course, I'll come on and do it. And that was just, I was on cloud 9. People that were there in my close circle, they're like, oh man, Patrick hasn't been that excited in a while. I was pretty stoked to have Larry Dahlberg.
Well, when we first started, we had to come up with a list of names, and I said, let's do a top 50, just a pie in the sky, superstar list of 50. And we've pulled more than 1 or 2 of the names off that list. And for me, it was Zumbo. Cloud 9 for sure.
Jim, thank you for coming on. That was awesome. And who else, like, as far as the hunting side? I mean, you pulled in some good guests too.
I mean, we've got Kevin with Matrix Target. And the thing that comes to mind when we're talking about all these guys and when we've had them on is these are busy guys with big careers, big names, and we're just little old RadCast here in Riverton, Wyoming, right?
Jason Matzinger.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a really good one. I really love the work that he's doing. That was a cool hunting episode. I really enjoyed that.
And we're still working on more guests, but with all those names and all those people, they've been really humble and kind and just cool guys to sit down for an hour of their lives and, get to talk to. Yeah. Caleb with Sheep Feet. That was an awesome episode.
Yep. Yeah, and Caleb, we're looking forward to hearing from you again. I'm sure we'll be talking soon, but There's, one of the other things, and I get a lot of feedback about this on the show, is we bring on people who are also new to the space. And so I think of Erin Campbell. She's the state geologist, and she got into hunting. We brought her on, talked about hunting. Shireen, from County 10. She was another one. Jess Johnson, Jaden, recently, the last episode. Just like, we've had a lot of big names, and we've had a lot of just, great people that are, maybe newer to it, or, playing a different role in it. And I think that is part of what makes this show what it is that it's not just about getting big names, but it's also highlighting just some awesome people that we get to meet.
People that are doing awesome stuff. And
well, like Mike Kettner, I really enjoy getting to know him. He's such a nice guy and does good work. And it was just really cool to hear, his episode on blood trailing dogs and just hunting taxidermy. Gene Gallitz, having him come on, retired police officer, and just an awesome man, having him on. And it's insane when I look back at the list and how many great people that we've had. Just such a great opportunity to talk to, like Sarah Trampy, with her guiding service up in, and Sportsman's Journal TV and all the stuff she's doing. It's so cool, man, because we've got to meet people and have conversations about things that we love. And we get to have these conversations in a way that I can go back and listen to it again. When Danny passed away, I went back and listened to that episode, just to kind of memorialize him and hear his excitement about talking about going to Europe and to Asia to finish that pike slam, while being just riddled with cancer and gutting it out and doing it because he loved it. And that was just so cool to go back and reflect on that.
Yeah. And I'm looking towards the future. We're going to be knocking on the door of episode 200, sooner than we are going to be on back to episode 50 for sure. And I'm just really excited about where we're going to go from here and what we can do with this.
If you had to pick a favorite episode so far, what do you think you would pick? And I'll even categorize it for you. What's your favorite hunting episode that we've done?
It actually... You're putting me on the spot, but it was
yes, I am.
The tournament bass fisherman from California.
Yeah. Bill Simental. Yeah, his was the best, in my opinion, on the fishing side of understanding how species, animals in general, not just fish, to your point, because I can see it churning in you because the behaviors are all the same, whether you're underwater or not.
That episode is what clicked for me, was the behaviors of predatory fish under the water are pretty much the same behaviors as predatory mammals above the water, right? And when those two things lined up, and Bill, he might be a tournament fisherman, right?
But he's a hunter.
He's a hunter, and him and I, because I've never met him, haven't really followed him, don't know who he was, just... You're like, hey, I got this guest. We're going to come on. I'm like, awesome, great. Let's go for it. We connected during that podcast, and I learned some stuff that never would have any other way.
And he's the greatest big bass fisherman of all time. The guy is just incredible. And I got to say, Bill, if you are listening to this, super cool dude. No ego about it. I'd love to come on your podcast. I'd love to talk about what I'm doing. Just one of the coolest guests we've ever had, for sure.
And it's a little bit of I wonder if it's chicken and the egg, right? Because we do reach out and try and get multiple guests on here. And you and I are always trying to, hey, I've got a podcast. Why don't you come on? Because that is, I'll be honest with you guys out there in Radio Land, that's one of Patrick's and my biggest battles, is getting my schedule, his schedule, and a guest schedule to line up that'll work, right? We had Jim Shockey scheduled, and it just didn't happen. Right? COVID happened, and it's not that he turned us down, he won't ever come on, but he was scheduled to be here, and I was very excited for that, right?
I believe he was in that top 5 on that list of people we wanted to have on, aspirational guests, for sure.
But I wonder if, because we reach out to so many people, maybe more of the egotistical people don't respond, see our email, maybe look at, hey, well, we only have X amount of followers, it's not worth my time. Maybe they automatically self-filter out, and, we get guys like Dahlberg that are like, I got nothing better to do. I'll give a hand up to these guys that are just starting out, right?
Yeah, and that meant a lot to me because that guy is just so well accomplished in the fishing world. I mean, he's Hall of Fame freshwater and saltwater. That's doing something. If you can be in the freshwater fishing Hall of Fame and saltwater fishing Hall of Fame, you've done something. And he doesn't need RadCast at all, but he cares about fishing and he cares about conservation. He cares about helping other people in the sport. And so that really meant a lot to me, and every guest that's been on has meant a lot to me. Even our kids, having their kids on was really cool, hearing them talk about, whether it's your son with Alaska, whether it's my kids talking about, fishing with dad, filming, all that stuff. Like that stuff means something.
More importantly is the listeners may not care, but you and I are going to get to sit down in 20, 30 years and listen to our kids while they're still at home. And there's something about that, you only get little kids for 5 years. Then they turn into these teenagers. You've got one or two running around the house. I've got one running around the house, and they definitely are a challenge. The only reason to keep your kids alive is grandkids. That's what I've decided. My mother used to say she believed in late term abortion, and 18 should be the cutoff. I was a problem child, to say the least.
Pushed her to the max.
More than once, yes.
Yeah, but to your point, yeah, I think it's cool that, once we do these recordings, they're there forever. And it's really neat to be able to go back and listen. Again, like I said, I listened to Danny's, I'll never get to talk to Danny again like that. And I can at least go back and listen to it. And that's pretty cool because we spent a lot of trips talking fishing, driving through Nebraska and all other
and it's
places.
Gone.
Yeah.
That's all gone, right?
Yep. So.
And when we started this, I mean, County 10, I don't remember the very infancy, but I've always wanted to market this way. And I remember the first kind of discussion we sat down, I said, I want it to be like guys sitting around a campfire, just hanging out, having a good time. I don't quite want to devolve down just to silly slapstick comedy. I want to have some substance, a nice conversation. And that's, for me, when I go elk hunting, not so much other hunts where I'm targeting a specific animal, but when I'm going on a 2-week elk vacation, we're taking the families, we're taking the campers, we're doing the circle the wagons and have the big fire pit in the middle. The harvest is why we're there. I would struggle going without a tag just to go. As I get older, I think I'll be able to do that for sure. But the highlight, like Africa, I took my dad and brother this spring, right? Mm-hmm. The highlight was coming back in the evenings, sitting around the campfire, telling stories, telling jokes, teasing people, right? Mm-hmm. All in good heart. But that camaraderie and that bond, you won't find anywhere else.
Well, and people will ask me, what makes your outdoor podcast different than other ones? And it's interesting when you go out and you listen to other outdoor podcasts that are hunting and fishing specific. I think you kind of have a couple of other categories besides what we're doing. One is where people are crude and, slapstick comedy, whatever you want to call it, just kind of ridiculousness, and that's fine if that's what you like. And then you have some that are just really dry.
They are rough
and are really rough to listen to. I mean, they have good information, but they're not very entertaining. And some of the guests are just like, wow, that was tough to listen to. But I feel like we kind of draw a nice balance of having the ability to joke around, have fun, but also give some content that is actually meaningful and is fun to listen to. Like I know people have commented a lot on Hannah Stonehouse Hudson that we had on that talked about ice fishing and losing her husband, to ice fishing, but like how she uses that to help people with grief counseling, all that kind of stuff. Examples like that mean a lot to me because it's like, hey, that actually helped somebody, that made somebody feel better or help them have a new perspective.
And we've had lots of guests, like Susan, talking about taking kids in the outdoors. And I think that's been a backup theme or a backup character in the whole way through is, you and I have young kids. We're heavily involved in the outdoors. We were as young kids, and it's something that's passionate enough that we want to pass on. And this is a cool form to get to. I think about all those moms and dads and guests and kids and, even talking to Zumbo, how do you get more kids involved in the outdoors? What do you see for the next generation in the future? And there's some good tips and tricks in there for sure. If you go listen to all 100 episodes from the kids' side and from the parents' side.
Mm-hmm. And there's some great recipes. That's always been a favorite part of the show. But I think, I don't know about you, but for me, I would say the thing I'm most proud of for our podcast is that we've really stuck true to what we intended to do. I feel like we've dedicated this to really helping people with their families and friends go do something maybe new or different in the outdoors, give them better ideas on maybe how to be better conservationists, better
sportsmen, better stewards, just better human beings.
Exactly. Like we had the hunting ethics thing that we did, and that was a popular episode. And I think that rang true to a lot of people because they don't like seeing worm containers, at the lake. They don't like seeing the trailheads trashed. And
I don't want to see a cigarette carton or a Copenhagen carton somewhere. I don't use tobacco, and I don't want to see it. And we've harped on that pretty good. So, are we gonna fix it? No, but maybe one person that has listened to this will, next time they're out there fishing with their worm containers gone, oh, David and Patrick might show up and yell at me.
Well, I'm
going to pick this up.
Yeah, I just think it's cool that we've stayed true to who we are. And I see a lot of podcasts that, they're like, what do we have to do to get more listeners? Do we have to throw in more jokes? Do we have to be more crude? Do we have to and you and I are like, no, we've decided what we're going to be as a podcast. And it's, and it's done fine, Oh
yeah, we've talked about it, and I like to listen to Joe Rogan when he has a guest I want to listen to, right? And here in Wyoming, we're driving lots of miles, and I'm usually on the road with the family, so I like to throw it on the Bluetooth to the radio, turn it on the radio, and listen to a podcast as I drive. There we go, right? I can't turn Joe Rogan on. I can't trust him that I got young ears in the back that we can't be dropping F-bombs in the middle of a random sentence, right? And if you want to talk that way, that's fine. I'm not going to look down on you or judge you, but I don't speak that way in my home around my kids, and I can't, and so now we have to have a discussion if we do have that. So we've kept it family friendly because our kids listen to this. Yeah.
Our kids enjoy this podcast, and they like the guests, and sometimes they even suggest the guests, like Lindsay Persico coming on, from Alone the Beast. I mean, it's like, every once in a while the kids are like, hey Dad, you should try to get a hold of whoever, and I try to bring them on the show, and that's really cool to them.
Well, I mean, that speaks to maybe why we've had the success is we're just a couple of outdoorsmen who, I don't try to take myself overly serious for sure. I mean, I'm lucky to be where I'm at. I'm very, very fortunate that I get to do what I do for work now. And, I'm thankful to get to come on and have these guys that are, kind of my heroes, kind of guys I've looked up to that have been industry leaders for ever since I was born, right?
Yep. And I learned something from everybody that we bring on, which is really cool. You talked about Bill, coming on talking fishing. I mean, that was like a clinic on fish behavior. And if you haven't listened to those 2 episodes, you're really missing out because those are packed with great hunting and fishing information. You would think it's just fishing, but man, you can apply it exactly like David said to hunting.
We applied it theoretically in the podcast to hunting. Yes. And so, and what's interesting with, I'm not going to say that he was, no offense to him. He's just been in that industry long enough and picked up tips and tricks from other guys, right? Or watched fish behavior or, and so there's a culmination of knowledge in that one or those 2 episodes that he's gained over 30, 40 years from other guys that spent 20, 30, 40 years fishing, right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of that is the cream on the top that you can scrape that and take those tips out in the field, whether you're fishing or hunting, and apply them. There's an old adage, 80% of the game is harvested by 20% of the sportsman. And that's true. I've met some guys that are phenomenal fish killers. Boom, they pick up a weapon and go in the woods, and they're phenomenal hunters. Mm-hmm. One of those guys is Zach Even. I mean, he really is. I've been bow hunting 5X Zach Even, and he outperforms me. That guy is an animal. You go fishing with that guy for for lake trout. Mm-hmm. That guy kills some lake trout, right? And he knows what he's doing, and he's just smart. And there's guys like that pick up a sport. You know, I think of when we were in high school trying to learn to ride wheelies on bikes, right? I still can't wheelie a bike more than about a half a block and I tip over. My one cousin can get on a mountain bike, a dirt bike, or a BMX bike, and he can wheelie 2-3 states until he needs to quit, right?
Yeah.
And turn U's and go the other way in a wheelie. And I've always admired guys that can pick up a skill and just, you know, I've fly fished for a lot of years. I'm not a pretty fly caster. I just get to fly out there, and, you know, but there's some guys that have can two-hand fly rod cast saltwater stuff 150 yards, right?
Like Larry Dahlberg.
Yeah, like Larry Dahlberg. And that's why they have, you know, line class world records.
Yeah, and Hall of Fame and all that. I was going to say another thing I've been really proud of with this podcast is we've been able to help some people too. You know, I was thinking about Katie Carey and her bass fishing tournament, which is how we got to know Bill with that BBZ Junior Bass Master Championship thing, and she went down to
I know High Mountain Seasonings and Bow Spider both sponsored her to go
and
do
PK.
That. And PK,
yeah. And it was really neat to see her with her fishing jersey, to see RadCast on there, to see all those other ones you just mentioned. It's just like, wow, that was cool. You know,
send a kid fishing
to be a part
on a
of
trip
that.
That's, you know,
prestigious,
kind of once in a lifetime.
Yeah,
big deal.
And she worked hard for that.
Yeah.
She had to catch qualifying bass to win and to enter that national tournament. And she went and she did her best. And I thought that was cool. And then RJ from Outer Limits, you know, and his cooling system, you know, brought him on. But like, it's kind of neat to be able to be like, hey, this person needs help, maybe needs showcased a little bit. Bring him on and see what happens. We
don't have to answer to corporate media sponsor. No. Why are you bringing this guest on there? No, we're not doing that. No, Patrick and I go, this guy's got a cool story, or this gal, or this person's got something we want to talk about. Yeah, you may never have heard them, but here they go. And then we do get to go on the other side of the coin and reach out to the, you know, the Zumbos and the Dahlbergs and the, you know, the names that are household names. And that's a cool balance.
And it's cool because some of our episodes are very much based on tips and tricks, and some of our episodes are based on grit and gutsiness. Like I think about bringing Seth on and talking about his Swiss Alps 240 miles in 15 days. I mean, that one was much more about gritting it out in the outdoors.
Stick-to-itiveness, right?
And just being able to hold your own and keep your mind right. You know, Lindsay talked a lot about that too. You know, it's all about your mindset. So I think our podcast also hits on a lot of things that aren't just hunting and fishing related. It's life skill related.
And I was going to mention that is one thing I've noticed is there's a lot of hardcore bow hunters that are successful at other endeavors, right? And is it because bow hunting gives you the skills to be able to be successful in those arenas? Or is it because people who are successful bow hunters just are successful people? I don't know, that's chicken or the egg again, but I would more lean towards, for me, you know, being in Alaska and Wyoming, if I can navigate a situation where a grizzly bear is going to take my meat successfully, going into a business, you know, a business setting where we're going to have a discussion or a barter system or a negotiation of something, it's like, well, this ain't a grizzly bear that's going to eat me, right? You know, the worst case scenario, I may come out not unscathed, but I'm not going to lose my life here. So it definitely, it changes your perspective of that checks and balance danger situation, right? It's like, what's the worst that's going to happen? Worst case, I can deal with worst case. Let's move on.
Yeah. It's cool to talk to people about their experiences and how they've dealt with adversity and, you know, how they navigate things. That's been pretty fun to do on the podcast. And what I like about it too, is it comes up organically. It's not something that we have to force. It just comes out in general conversation. Like you said, like we're around a campfire, it just happens.
No, we do. I mean, for the listeners out there, there is a loose script. It's usually, you know, pretty much a generic 6 to 12 similar questions. You know, it's if you guys have listened to a bunch of them, I'm give you behind the curtains, behind the scenes here. It's kind of who you are, where you come from, why are you here today, and then we get into the nuts and bolts of exactly why they're here, and then we ask them their favorite recipe, and out the door they go. I mean, that's kind of our blueprint. And why have we kind of navigated to that? Because that's what I want to know from people.
That's what we're interested in. It's that simple.
Why are you here in front of me today? What makes you either an expert or interesting?
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into that.
And when I've had people suggest guests, I'm like, okay, you suggested that guest, I've secured that guest. What would you want to ask them if you were on the show? And so that's been helpful too, is we've had listener suggested questions where I ask what they would like me to ask them. And that's been kind of fun too. And this is a podcast where you can actually ask us to bring on a guest, and you can ask us to ask them certain questions, and we're happy to do that.
And so looking to the future, I don't have aspirations of making this the next Joe Rogan podcast. Even if I could, and I'm not going to even pretend that I could, it's not going to happen. But for the future, I just want to keep it you and I hanging out, chatting with people that are interesting.
Yep. And having fun doing it. And, we've been able to do some fun trips as a result of the podcast and go do some fun things. And we intend to keep doing that and bringing back that information. As David does his world traveling hunts, we'll always bring him on to talk about what all he's doing. And when I do my little fishing trips here and there, we'll talk about those. I mean, it's the stuff we care about, stuff we're interested in. But I think we also really should talk about, the sponsors and kind of just
for
how
sure.
meaningful those are.
We couldn't keep this up. I mean, just the website hosting and the podcast hosting and the equipment and the space. I mean, without some of that funding, this doesn't exist, right?
Yeah. And people think, oh, it's just a couple of guys recording. Well, you've got thousands of dollars in equipment. You've got your time. You've got to have a space. We've invested in sound stuff to help kind of keep the echoes down. And you'll notice over the evolution of the podcast, it's gotten better. There's no way we could have done it without our high mountain PK and bow spider relationships. Those wouldn't have materialized. It would have been a lot slower, I guess. If we'd had to do it on our own, it would have just happened a lot slower.
I think when there was that major transition from County 10 to our own, without their support, I think it would have been like, you know what, there's no, Patrick has another full-time job. David's got another full-time job. This isn't our mainstay, but we definitely want to keep this moving forward. And without those sponsors, without their advertising dollars. So what I'm saying to you guys is, if you're in the fishing industry, bam, you better be looking up PK. If you're in the fishing or hunting industry, boom, go look at High Mountain Seasoning. They got something. We've told you 100 times, and we've made recipes, and it's no joke. I use it all the time, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's down to the point where when we have dinner, my kids getting the salt and pepper garlic rub from High Mountain Seasoning out of the cupboard, and that's what's going on top of it. He's like, where's my garlic rub, right?
It's so good. And if you haven't been to our YouTube channel, we do have one, and we have a bunch of High Mountain videos on there, and you can go and check those out. I just put one out that David and I did up in Alaska, which was way fun. We did High Mountain Seasoning smoked fish. Smoked salmon, of course.
By far their gourmet
fish brine
on sockeye. Because we did my dad's homemade family passed down recipe. We did the recipe that I concocted or absconded with in Alaska. Then we did the gourmet, and did
the Alaskan.
And by far, the taste test proved, because it was same fish, brine, same time, smoked in the same smoker. Everything was identical other than which brine the fish came out of it. If you've got your own take, great. If you want more lemon pepper, great. But for me, I'm just going to gourmet and bring it home, and I'll be happy.
So another funny story about that. The very first time I smoked fish was with gourmet fish brine that Danny Kurtula bought me to do a bunch of splake and cutthroat trout that we caught here ice fishing. And I remember feeding it to my grandma, and she's like, man, this is amazing. I had my little Chief smoker back then, that little tiny 3-rack system. It took forever to smoke.
That's great if you're doing 3 fish, right?
Yeah.
It's perfect if you're going to do 3 trout.
6 big trout. So it took like multiple sessions to get through that. And so now I've upgraded my situation so I can handle a lot more fish. But I'll never forget that, because that was back in like 2008. I was using gourmet fish brine back then and still using it.
Had a little cheap
2023. So, same with PK though. I've been using PKs since 2008, and did a lot of work with them in their infancy. And man, you talk about amazing lures that you can catch literally any kind of fish on. I mean, they're incredible.
I have Master Angler. You and I caught it, but PK lure, right? And I'm not going to be as quick to the draw with finishing my Master Angler as Danny or you or even your kids. But I think I've got 3 now, and I've got the goal of it's back there. We're going to start targeting and getting the rest of them, just because. I don't know why, because it can.
It's fun.
It's there. It's fun.
It's a challenge, right? Like, and everybody wants a challenge.
And just without that system, I don't think I would be nearly as interested in going after different species within Wyoming. You invite me to go fishing, sure, let's go, or go with anybody else, right? But now I'm like, hey, I got to get after the species and go. I got to break the minimum so I can submit my. I don't know why.
It's fun.
It's fun.
Yeah, I mean. It's just like anything else. Why do we do the outdoor stuff that we do? It's fun. We want a challenge. Whether it be like, if you're just a day hiker, you have a challenge of trying to do that trail that day, or if you've got an elk hunt, you've got a challenge to go harvest that elk and get it out of there. If you're like me trying to catch a Master Angler, or David, we know the size that we need to catch, and we're going to go try to find the body of water that has them, and then try to catch them, and then get it all done. So, I mean, it's all about challenging yourself to get better.
And there's this evolution, and I'll use bear hunting as the best example, but we can apply to fishing is, as a young man, you first start bear hunting, you just want to shoot a bear, any bear, you don't care. I just want to get a bear. Once you get a bear, then you just want to get a big bear, right? You want to get lots of bears, you want to get a big bear. Once you've harvested a couple bear, you kind of go, you know what, I either want a specific color phase or the old behemoth bear that's on his way down and out, right? And you're willing to pass adolescent bears for sure.
Absolutely.
And then once you finally, top tier, 3 decades of bear hunting, you've harvested some really big, say several really big bears, you'll get to the point where you just take a camera and you go, you know what? I just want to go interact with bears. Same thing with a rainbow trout fisherman, right? First you start out as a little kid, I just want to catch a trout. Then I want to catch a lot of trout. Then I want to catch a big trout. And once you catch one big one, then you're like, no, I want to go to this body of water with this lure at this time and catch the biggest trout in the place. And then you get to a point in your trout fishing career, your bear hunting career, your elk hunting career, where you just want to take other people and see them catch their first trout or harvest their first bear or see their first elk, right? That gets to be the fun. And that's kind of with our kids. You and I are now more on that. You take all your kids fishing, just keeping hooks baited or lures and tangles and people in the water. Dad doesn't get to fish very much.
No, and it's kind of funny because like I've been pursuing the ultimate angler thing and I'm really close, but I know I would be there if I was a single guy. That would be easy. I'd be done, but I'm not. And I'm proud to say that all my kids have at least 3 of the Master Angler species caught, submitted, done. In fact, Faith has 5. And
she's on her way to be the youngest.
Yeah, she could be the youngest ultimate angler. I mean, she's very driven about it, and I'm proud of that. It's like, yeah, I don't have it yet. I will, but I'm passing up a lot of opportunities because I want my kids to have them, and I'm putting them on the best spot to cast. I'm putting them on the best, place wherever we go because I want them to have it.
And they're going to pass that forward in 2 decades, Patrick. They're going to have their kid out there and be like, "Hey, Dad brought me right here. You stand here. You cast here. I'll wait. No, you cast, right?" And that's part of what we're trying to perpetuate with this podcast.
Yep. I think specifically of Faith catching her 28-inch burbot. Like, that could have been my fish easily. So I was like, I want to see my kid catch this fish.
Do you remember going on the Kenai with Hunter?
Yeah.
And I set him up in
awesome.
the spot on the end of the ramp. And I'm having to hold everybody out there. Hunter's, flossing and hooked into a, maybe an 8-pound red. Maybe it was 12, but it was probably more like 8-9 pound fish.
It's a nice fish.
I'm having to hold the rod above the the cork so it might break, and hold the back of his life jacket because the fish is going to pull him in the river, and he's not strong enough to hold the rod. But he's sitting there cranking for all he's worth and winching that thing in.
You know what, though? Everybody on that bank that was watching him hooked up and watching you hold him and keeping him from getting pulled into the river was just smiling ear to ear because it was so cool to see him do that.
Yeah, and it was, as a dad, it would have been way more, not rewarding, but as the fishing, wanting to check the box of fishing, I wasn't fishing, right? I was sitting there helping a kid who didn't want to get wet and was trying to engage and have fun, but he, going to Boyson and letting him have his own rod and, catching planter rainbows, great, perfect, awesome, right? We can go down to Flaming Gorge or go up here to one of the dams and utilize some power bait, and then I can set his rod and I can go fish. In that situation, in that raging river, no, Dad, I didn't get to fish, right?
Yep.
Now I fished earlier in the day and then I fished later, but at that moment it was about him, and I was 100% supportive and glad to be there.
And he had a blast.
Oh yeah, I'll never forget. I'm sitting here holding the rod, holding his life jacket, like, it'd be a lot easier for me to just take this rod and reel this fish in, but that's not the point.
And he caught some great fish and was a big contributor, and I think that's really cool. My two oldest are getting ready to do hunter safety, and so I'm looking forward to them being contributors on the hunting side, this next year potentially for big game, which is really cool.
And we've had, a couple elk episodes, just elk tips that I've done, right? And I'm, again, nobody. I still, as far as a big game, successful big name now, I've stumbled onto a few elk and have gotten lucky more than once, and I'd rather be lucky than good.
But you've had a lot of fun, and I think about, again, fun trips we've done, that cow elk hunt we just did, and the pheasant hunting and the fishing in Alaska. We've done local fishing here. I think about that day on the Wind River where you caught your first brown, caught that really nice brown too.
Yeah. You caught the rainbow that's mounted, I believe.
It was a big cutthroat.
Yeah, cutthroat.
Snake River cut, and that was an epic day of fishing. Absolutely epic.
Yeah, that was great. Wind River, I think that was the Magic Mile in Casper.
The Miracle Mile, yeah.
Yeah, or no, maybe that was Pinedale. Weren't we in Colorado?
I can't remember. But the fishing was awesome.
Yes, it was.
We've had some really fun times, and we're going to have a lot more fun times. I mean, it's just, again, we both have full-time jobs. We're both busy people. I've got 4 kids. You've got 3 kids. You're running a business. I'm trying to get businesses to the state, doing all kinds of other stuff, but it's a cool time to be a part of RadCast and be doing this. And I think that we're going to have a lot more to bring forward. I already know one of them, just so that you all know, is we're talking to Dan Thompson here pretty soon about black bear. And so that's coming up, and we've got a lot of other ones planned too.
Yeah, I kind of mentioned to Patrick, I'm like, we've done all the large carnivores except for one with Dan. We might as well. We better do the last one. But while you were talking, I'm excited to get to go with you and help cow elk hunt with the kids for their first elk hunt.
Yeah.
You could tell me, hey, we're going to go after this monster bull archery for 3 weeks straight, or I get to go on a 1 or a 2 day cow elk hunt with some kids that have never gone. And I'm more excited about taking the kids cow elk hunting because they're going to be, everything's new, everything's exciting, everything, me, a cow elk hunt. Yeah, sure. Let's go get the meat for the freezer. Let's get home and get warm before extremities fall off.
But yeah, it'd be cool to see the kids harvest their first big game. So I'm pretty excited about that. And, we're going to have a lot more on fishing. We're going to have a lot more on all kinds of different topics. And it's always, it's always one of those things. Again, if you listen to this podcast and somebody that you think would be a really good guest, or you have a topic that you're like, hey guys, you haven't covered that yet.
Lander bread connection, baking bread.
Yeah.
For a hunting and fishing podcast. Well, you do need something to go besides your protein on your plate, right?
Yep. Yeah, we had Jake to come on and talk about climbing. That one, I remember that one well. Yeah. There's a lot of great podcasts that we've done and a lot of great guests. And so if you haven't, like David said, if you haven't listened to them, go back, download them.
There's 99 other ones right now. There's like Patrick said, probably over 100 hours of content.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So check them out. And, don't forget that one of the things that helps our podcast is when you rate the podcast, when you tell a friend about it,
because when you download it.
Yeah, we're not spending a whole bunch of money on marketing, guys. Like this is really a grassroots word of mouth podcast. So share it with your friends. That really helps.
But by keeping it the grassroots, we maintain 100% control. We get to pick the guests, and we're not under pressure to meet a marketing budget or a deadline or a quota. It's like, no, this is who we're going to talk to, and this is what's going to happen. So I'm thankful for everybody listening. I'm definitely thankful for the sponsors. Patrick, I'm thankful that you've put way more than those hours into keeping this running and going and moving forward. And yeah, I mean, let's sign up and let's look back and let's go to episode 200. When I first approached you, I'm like, hey, let's do a pilot of 12 episodes and see how it goes.
And we've blown that out of the water, haven't we?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that was a long time ago. I think when you might have mentioned when 12 and Zumbo was coming up soon, or had, I don't remember. I'm not gonna.
He was number 7, I think.
Yeah,
something like that.
And you're like, hey, we're coming up on number 12 here pretty quick. I'm like, well, let's go to 24. That's no brainer. Double this down, right?
Yep.
Well, let's double it again. So
yeah, I think we have a lot more that we can bring forward that's going to be useful and helpful. So we'll just keep after it and keep doing what we do. But yeah, we couldn't do it without all of you who listen. So thank you so much for all your support. It's been huge. And what are you looking forward to most over the next couple of years here, David?
I want to get a couple of those top 50 guests on here. There's a couple that we're gonna, short of driving up in a unmarked van and throwing them in, we'll strong arm a couple guys and get them on here for sure.
Yeah, I've got a few more fishing guests for sure that I would love to talk to and just get their perspective, and learn some things from them. I mean, I'm learning stuff all the time. There's a lot of really great anglers out there, and I do want to give a shout out to my friend Mark Hill. He lives down in Arizona. He just caught a state record smallmouth bass. And he could have kept it, and he could have submitted it, but he submitted for the catch and release. He decided to let that big fish go. It was over 6.5 pounds. It was a really nice smallmouth.
So now it's still down there swimming around.
Yep, and he is a fish killer. That guy can catch fish. I mean, he's one of the best walleye anglers I've ever seen, and he's turning into one heck of a bass angler too. So just got to give him a big shout out. That's a catch of a lifetime.
For sure. And that's cool. Congrats.
Yeah. So, well, guys, we're going to head out and get back to work on some other things. But again, thank you for your support. And we'll look forward to creating a whole bunch more of RadCast Outdoors.
Until next time, go find one of those recipes, try it, get out in the outdoors, and take a kid, a neighbor, a newbie, somebody with you, and share that experience with them.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thanks again for listening to the RadCast Outdoors Podcast. We hope that you've enjoyed the show. If so, please go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this podcast and subscribe, share, and give us a 5-star rating, which really helps other people find the show. You can find all of our shows, recipes, giveaways, videos, and much more at radcastoutdoors.com. While you're there, please help support the show by purchasing a RadCast Outdoors shirt or hat. Please don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We also have a RadCast community on Facebook called RadCast Nation, and we'd love for you to join in the conversation there. And of course, please help support our sponsors who make this show possible. Thank you again to PK Lures, Bow Spider, and High Mountain Seasonings. Until next time, get out there and enjoy the outdoors.